You're more than likely moving over from another system, so you'll be aware that at some stage, if Elevate fulfills your requirements, you'll need to settle on a date to cut over from your existing solution. Draw a line in the sand and commit to managing via Elevate. We call this the start date or your conversion date. You'll see your conversion date via the accounting module and the opening balances tab. As the warning here suggests, be careful about changing this once you've actually started to enter data and use the system in earnest, but for now you can just leave it at its current setting. By default, when you sign up for an Elevate trial, your conversion date is set to the first day of the current month. By the time you've fully evaluated the system, you might well have moved into the next month, so you can of course change that afterwards. Some people set it to the start of the current or the previous month and are happy to enter some transactions in retrospect, and others will set it to the start of the next month and get prepared in advance. I suppose that depends to some extent on whether you're closer to the 1st or the 31st of the month. The conversion date is an important consideration for a number of reasons. First of all, Elevate will not automatically apply rent or charges prior to this date. It believes that anything before that date is already taken care of on the old system. If there are rent arrears or unpaid charges, then these can be added manually as outstanding balances. Otherwise, it will just apply rent and charges from that date onwards. That's probably best illustrated with an example. A moment ago, we saw that our conversion date is set to the 1st of November 2020. Consider a tenancy which has been running since the start of the calendar year, so back in January. We always encourage you to record the actual tenancy dates, for example, to keep expiries and renewals accurate. So think for a moment about what Elevate will do here. Although the tenancy started back in January, it will only apply rent automatically from November onwards, so from the conversion date onwards. Otherwise, the tenant would have a big arrears balance, so 10 months worth, when in reality it's likely all paid up to date. If you change your conversion date to a later date, say next month, you may end up with rent, which the system has applied automatically, being no longer outstanding, so you might need to delete that. No big deal, but just to be aware of it. Similarly, if you move the start date backwards to the previous month, you may need to manually add rent, which the system didn't automatically apply with the original date setting. Anytime you add rent, charges, or a schedule with a date prior to the conversion date, Elevate will prompt you to ensure that that's what you want. It's just to avoid any undesired knock-on effects on your balances and arrears. Secondly, and equally importantly, you must be able to define who the money in your client bank account or accounts belongs to on that date, or at least as closely as possible. You must also know who owes you money and in turn who your agency owes money to on that date. Elevate imposes quite strict constraints on how money can be received into and paid out of client accounts in a good way and for good reasons. In order to manage this correctly, it needs to know who owns that money so that you don't pay money which belongs to one person out to someone else. In Elevate, that simply isn't possible. And you will, or you should be, glad to hear that. For the tenancy we added a moment ago, let's assume that last month's rent was already collected but not yet paid out to the landlord. I'll add this to the property balances having been paid mid-October, and the system just prompts me to make sure that I want that reflected into my opening balance, where it is actually shown as income. If there was a management fee also applied in October and this is still outstanding, that will be reflected in the opening balance also. If I then move my conversion date back to October, nothing changes in terms of the property balance, but the line in the sand has shifted, so the new opening balance is 0, since all that activity in October is now after the conversion date. Don't worry about the details of this at this stage, it's just to illustrate a point. There's a full video on this topic. So how can you try things out without filling your account full of test data which then needs removed later? Don't worry about this. You can easily remove those test records yourself, or if you want to just let us know, we'll help you clear that out. But equally, if you've taken time to enter loads of real data, then don't worry either. We only wipe test data if you ask us to, otherwise it stays in place. The main takeaway from this video is that in order to choose an appropriate conversion date, you must know the breakdown of your client account bank balances on that date, as well as who owes what to the agency in terms of rent arrears and outstanding charges. So it's picking a date that you can obtain those balances very accurately for. We'll look at setting up these opening balances in a dedicated upcoming video.